It's all good. All right. So, hello. This is Adrienne from Fame Consulting. I am here with my bestie, Tuso, and we are going to be doing our monthly book review. This month, I picked Daring Greatly: How the Courage to Be Vulnerable Transforms the Way We Live, Love, Parent, and Lead by Brene Brown. It is March, it's Women's History Month, so why not have a female author? Okay, so we're going to jump straight into it, and we're going to start with our 10 out of 10 recommend.
You go first this time.
Oh my God, you did go first this time. Okay, so for me, I'm going to give it an 8 because she was reading me, and I definitely, like, it's hard to read a book by someone who is a shame researcher and not feel like you were being read. So I felt seen. There was a lot of stuff that definitely hit home, resonated with me, made me feel like, dang, I'm in a therapy session right now. But it was all good stuff, things that I needed to really kind of have a conversation with myself about, especially when it comes to like disengagement and trust. And I was like, yeah, I definitely see how that plays out. And I'm listening because I did the audiobook. I'm listening to it and I'm thinking, dang, I know exactly when I did that. Dang, I recognize that trigger. And it's like, you know the things, but do we necessarily do better all the time? No. So I think it did a good job of putting things in front of you for you to really kind of think it through and then realize that, all right, there are other things that I can be doing to have different outcomes in my life. I like the stories that she shared, like her own personal journey. It's hard to write a book about vulnerability and not put yourself into it. So I liked, her talking about her TED Talks and like wanted to immediately take it down off of Facebook. That's how I feel every time I do a video for the channel. So there are things that I resonated with and I liked. The reason I took 2 points off is I feel like I've heard some of this before, and I don't know if it's because I've picked up this book before, if I've read her book before, or I've listened to her talks before. But I really don't have much negative to say, other than I feel like some of it I've either read, heard, or listened to before. But it's okay because I do need to reinforce some of these things for myself and continue to practice. I'm not perfect, and I thought it was a good book for me to really kind of be introspective and then think about like, well, how does this also play out not only in my personal life, but also in my professional life as an entrepreneur. So I'm going to turn it over to you now, Tuso. What did you think?
6.5.
Okay, very specific.
Just because as someone who consistently practiced vulnerability, I think if I didn't do so a lot, then I think I would probably rate the book higher. But I feel like vulnerability from the standpoint that she was talking about, it was a very strong argument. But I felt like there are areas that didn't get touched on in the book. Because think about it, like, what was it? She spent like chapter 3 and 4 almost diving into 5 about vulnerability. You know what I mean? And I think that when I originally picked up the book just off the title, I was hoping to get something that would get me off my ass. All right, daring greatly. So, like, what does that mean? And I didn't get that. Like, I could pick up any other book on vulnerability because a lot of the book was spent on vulnerability. Like, you know what I mean? And the stories were great, especially the ones about like how she interacts with her husband, her daughter, and herself. Um, and also I think that vulnerability looks very different for Black people. And I didn't want to bring race into it, but a lot of times I was reading, I was like, what a privileged thing to say. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and that made me give it a 6.5. I think she is a great researcher. I think she practices empathy very well. But I guess I was just a little bit disappointed because I wanted more out of her. Like, especially like it would be great to have more statistics because she was she's a researcher. That would have been great. From a standpoint of a woman, I think she made a great points, but I don't know. I guess I just wanted a little bit more.
Okay. That's fair. That's fair. And
She might be
then,
reading she'd be reading people. I think it would have been great if she spoke more about men and vulnerability, like how she like touched on it a little bit in chapter 4. I think that would have been like more intriguing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but from my standpoint, I'm just like, okay, cool. Like, I get this.
well, I mean, I think there's definitely space for more on the conversation. And I think she even I think I know what you're talking about in chapter 4, because she even said it herself that like she had almost like a unknown bias that, oh, men don't need to be having the conversation. And then she like adapted the research later to try and like tap into that more. But definitely space for more on that conversation. But I do want to ask you, like, what did you gain from this book? Or, if you don't, like, what resonated with you or stood out to you for this book?
I think what I just mentioned stood out, the conversation about men and vulnerability. And what also stood out to me was, so I wanted to be more in line with you. So I read the book and listened to the audiobook at the same time. And what was interesting is that certain language would change from the printed version to the audio version, which I thought was very interesting because it was things regarding sex, gender, it was just interesting. Like, I wanted to know more of that. Like, oh, why did he change this word? It's like they changed specific things from the original copy to have it to be more inclusive. And I thought that was interesting. But to answer your question, I would actually like to hear more research and have her dive more into that part. Because I took away a lot, especially from the story that she shared with the husband, who had, like, when she had the talk, and the husband with the wife, and the wife is there calling him every minute, and he's trying to, in that moment, have a vulnerable moment, right? But his wife won't even let him have that because she's like ready to go. And he has so much that he has to say or release. And I love the fact that she gave him the space to do that. And that to me was like, that had me like really diving in his story around that. Because I think everything else I kind of understood, digested, or experienced in a way, and still am experiencing. But because I work with a therapist and I try to become more vulnerable over time with my friends and with my family, there were certain things in there that I was like, oh, I get that. I can see that. And then there was other things like, but like I said, it could be from a perspective because as a Black woman in America, like, it's different.
No, it's definitely different. And I think she did the best to be authentic and write about her experience. So, listen, Brene Brown is from Texas. Like, she did talk about like biases against, like, that people carry around gays, and how, like, listen, I'm not getting into the whole political side of things. And I don't personally know her on a personal level, but I know that her journey must have been very different from what we go through. She's from Texas. We're from New York. We're Black women. She is not. So, yeah, she's going to only be able to do the best to cover her experience. And I think some more stats would be cool. And at least for myself, like, taking away, like, for me, I struggle with finding the time to slow down and just like be introspective, as opposed to like being like go reactive, and actually kind of like thinking through and reflecting. So like, even doing I did the audio version, like I said, and like listening to it, a lot of times I had to pause because I was like, all right, I can actually replay the moment in my mind where I was triggered and I made this choice, and I could have probably made a conscious decision to do something else. So what I'm taking away from this is more of questions that I want to continue to like ask myself, and just be in more dialogue and be a little more intentional about what I'm doing, who I'm being, when I'm being
Girl,
triggered.
you want to ask me? Because I could tell you about yourself.
I know you can, but that's a whole nother video. Okay. Thanks.
No, just because like, I think I understand where you're coming from, because this book, like when I read certain sections in this book, I was like, look at Adrienne right here. The fact that, like she said, like being just a woman studying what she was studying and having people have their biases against her, you know what I mean? From jump, and people doubting her. And I think from everyone's perspective, we get that. And I think what was interesting, because she kept on repeating it, was like you said, her wanting to remove the TED Talk and the anxiety she had around the TED Talk. And I felt like, compared to what I got in the book and the title, when I think daring greatly, right? Yeah, you have to be vulnerable, but I think it takes a little bit more of, I was hoping that she would talk a little bit more about fear. Because like one can be super vulnerable and still not dare greatly, because they have a level of, I think, fear, right? Because I think like vulnerability can be a part of fear, but fear and vulnerability is not the same. And I think she showed examples where I wish she dived in more, like, with just the way she spoke with her husband and the way her husband supported her in that moment of fear and anxiety, that like you said, like I wish that she dived in deeper, because I think that would be an interesting perspective from her point of view, you know what I mean? Especially as a researcher, like how do we get past, like now we're playing this vulnerability game, but how many times can we count that we've been vulnerable and still have anxiety after being vulnerable? You know what I mean? And then like, how do you climb out of that? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you have moments all the time, like, y'all tell me that I don't like to ask for help, right? And there are times where I ask for help and I'm vulnerable to be like, yo, I need help with this, or I need this. And there goes the vulnerable moment. And then it's not reciprocated in a substantial way, right? Like, okay, so then how do you move forward with that, right? Because then you have the thought like, oh, I knew I shouldn't have asked, da da da. And then whatever you're daring greatly to do, right? To step out on, you're back at step one, questioning that. So you play the vulnerability game, but then what?
Well,
like, you know what I mean?
I had, like, honestly, I had full disclosure, I had like 2 panic attacks today. And then I had to call Ricky up and like talk me through this. And one of them, I had to call one of my other friends and then call Ricky after that, because I was really like having all this angst and energy around it. But for me, normally, if I wasn't reading this book, like normally my MO is, let me just work through it. And literally when I say work through it, not like process it, but just work and keep myself busy, moving, and never address it. And maybe it'll just like subside into the subconscious or fall away. But I said, for me, like I had to push through it and actually call them, explain what it is, name the thing, name the fear. And that took a lot of vulnerability on my part, because I'm not one to, this, to really support, like ask for support, or even in the moment when I'm actually going through the feels, to stop and be like, I need help right now. And that, I have to say that if I wasn't having this moment reading this book, I probably would have dealt with it in my old fashioned and automatic and just like try to pretend like it wasn't there. So no, I don't think she really answered it in the book, but I can at least provide this perspective. At least when you're being gripped by the fear, reach out to someone and actually get support, and call a friend. Like, it's like, like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Like, call a friend in the moment as you're actually going through it. Don't go through it by yourself in silence. And sometimes it's like, for me, it would have taken me like 3 times as long to get through that gripping fear and actually realizing like, all right, it's not that serious. the thing ended up not being that serious. Like he totally coached me through it. He was like, so what are you afraid of? And then I named it. And then it was like, so what can you do about it? And I was like, all right, I know I'm being coached right now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know, when somebody's putting you through the work and asking questions, but I was like, all right, instead of being resistant, let me just actually answer the questions. And in 3 questions, panic, fear, all of that was gone because I now had to address it and break it down into such simple terms. And actually, I voiced my own solution. He gave me nothing, and I was seeking somebody to give me the answers that I had for myself.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I can't say that's the formula for every situation, but at least for some, I know you can always call me Tuso in a moment, no matter what time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think that's certain fears, right? Like, yeah, you call your friends. I think we all do it. You call your friends, right? And then, you know, they can coach you through it. But once again, I think maybe because I had my idea in my head about the title, you know what I mean? You know how serious I am about this life that I have on this earth, this one thing that I get to live, and how hard I work and how much I cry and I break down and I call y'all because I dead ass want to win, right? You ain't give me the formula to win. Like in Atomic Habits, he told me what to do. Like I think that's just because it's me. You know how I am. Like, tell me what to do, I'ma do it, right? But as a person who feels a lot, you tell me to do the same shit I do now. I feel a lot. Like,
I got you.
Like,
I think this wasn't
like,
step. Yeah, this is different. I think we need to. This is why we can't read one book and expect to get all the answers from one book. So I think it's like the culmination of adding layers on top, like Atomic Habits plus this, plus that. You know what I mean? I know we can't all be in Atomic Habits, but
no, but I just feel as though, like, as a researcher, because I've read books before, right? Even with our next book, right, that you have coming up, he speaks about things, but there are tools, right? I think her tool throughout the whole book for your fear and the way to dare greatly, period, is to have consistent vulnerability, basically being open, right? But being open and being vulnerable looks very differently to different type of people.
that's fair. People
and
are
as a researcher,
not
right?
vulnerable.
Exactly. So as a researcher, for me, like, I would want to know, because, you know, I like information, being who I am. I wanted more information. Like, she had me so intrigued throughout certain stuff that I just wanted more information than feelings. Because
So,
I feel too much already. You know how I am. Like, I feel too much. So hence why, like, I will call you, right? Because it sounds messed up, right? Because that's what you're trying to work on now, but you're really good at, just like Ricky coached you, you're really good at coaching, because a lot of times your feelings are not in things. You think way logically. And for me, who is a creative thinker, right, but can also be too logical to the point that I'm overthinking everything, right? It's like, yo, miss, I'm done feeling. Like, let me get the facts.
yeah.
Like, oh, drink two spoons of lemon juice.
Right.
What's
the formula? Yeah.
That's what I'm looking for right now in my life. And I think she could have gave that, because she gave a glimpse of it when she spoke to the man and when she spoke to her daughter. Like, and so I was like, oh, you got it in you. Give me more. So even if she had a second book, or, you know, like another book about that, like, I would read it, because she's very brilliant on how she breaks down vulnerability. Because, you know, in chapter 4, she like breaks down chapter 4 into like different sections either way. But I was just looking for more of that, because she's a good storyteller.
Yeah.
And I just wanted more of that. I think as there's different type of people in the world, like people who want to learn how to feel like your ass, like, or that, you know, like, feeling is not your first thing. Awesome. It makes you think. But as someone who wakes up every morning and meditate and journal, ma'am, Is it 2 slices of bread and some peanut butter? Like, what?
Well, I'm going to stop you there because we actually are going to read her second book, Dare to
Okay.
Lead, later, not in another month. So I think this is actually a good segue so that we can kind of just introduce what the next book is going to be. But before we get there, I always have to bring it back to like, how do we walk through FIRE? FIRE stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. So how can we apply this practically? If you're an entrepreneur, vulnerability and being real and like authenticity, it is very attractive, and that's how you retain and maintain your clients. So I struggled with it for a while of like being the brand and like putting myself out there. I'm like, why can't I just create this thing and that thing is the thing? But no, I have to really be open and tell people in my life about what I'm up to. I can't tell you how many times I'd be like, I do that, right? And they're like, what? Like, I actually have to talk about what I do. And then asking for support. So especially with FIRE, like Tuso knows I've been through this journey. And I was actually telling a friend today, I was like, I own 5 properties, but I choose to rent and live with family because it was supporting me with my journey through FIRE to reduce my expenses. So I wanted to exit corporate. So I couldn't, like, yes, FIRE is simple if you're always just making more, but the other way to actually practice FIRE is to actually reduce your expenses as low as, as possible. So that looked like me doing a rent to own to try and sell the single family I was in. That looked like me going back to my multifamily and like, living in one unit and then renting the other one. It looked like me doing Amazon Subscribe and Save to get that extra 15% discount on like regular things. So it looks like a lot of steps and intentionality, but inside of that was support. Is that like I actually had to ask for support and be vulnerable. So it's like if you're going to be in the FIRE journey, it's not going to look pretty and glamorous like the entire time. Like you have to be willing to put in the work and risk being uncomfortable because the end goal is that important to you. So
correct.
Don't lose sight of your goals. And when you're actually going through the work, I have 2 kids. I have 2 little girls. So like for me, it's like I needed to go back and be closer to family because I needed the support. Be able to balance being an entrepreneur, being a girlfriend, being a mother. And without support, like any one of those things would have gone by the wayside. So I'm sorry, I'm like choking right now.
And I think even on a basic level with FIRE, right? Before, I hit you up about something today. And I hit up 6 or 5 different people about the same thing who all have jobs. And people are like, wait, I don't know. And I think with that, how can we have the financial literacy that we need without having the proper information? Mm-hmm. How many people are here filling out W-2, filling out W-4 and don't know how to fill them out properly? So you don't know if you're overly paying tax or you're paying, underneath what you're supposed to be paying, and I think that's a part of the journey, right? So being vulnerable enough to reach out to your resource and say, girl, I know this is silly, but
right.
I don't know how to do this. And I know that you are my friend that is in the right track. How can you assist me with this? Because I can't. I'm already like, I would love to own, a house. And guess what? In order to own the house that I want, I have to save up more money. So I have to pick up another job. But now this job I'm picking up for is asking me to fill out this W-4. But how do you fill out a W-4 when you have 2 jobs? You know what I mean? And I had to be vulnerable enough to be like, I could sit here and guess, right? Which is what I did the first night. And I was like,
this is
yeah. And then the second night, today when I was working on it, and I was like, so I'm getting the same answer I got the first night. And it might be correct, but I'm completely unsure. And as a result of that, let me hit up people. But then to realize people I was hitting up, they make good money, right? So they have to fill out a W-4. They've worked 2-3 jobs before, right? In their past. These people are invested in cryptocurrencies, they own houses, but y'all don't know how to fill out a W-4. Y'all can't help me to fill out a W-4 properly. Like, and it makes you it's not even funny. It made me sit back and like I reflected like, wow, how many other people look like me don't have the information?
Right.
Like, I know your 2 kids, when it's time for to fill out them W-4s, they can hit you up and be like, hey, mom. And I literally, the thought went through my head. It was like, oh no, I really need to learn this financial stuff properly. So when I have kids, they don't have to go around and call all their friends to figure this out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I don't have no problem around that, because I would rather ask than get it wrong and IRS try to come and take some money from me.
Listen, I know it's tax season. I'm in the middle of tax season doing taxes now, and I'm having conversations around W-4s today. So I get it. And the thing is, like, I tell people all the time, you go to school, you get a degree, you think that you would know how to do these things, but it's like they teach you how to go and have a job. They don't teach you how to be an entrepreneur or how to have the financial literacy that you need to navigate real life situations. They don't tell you how to calculate how much you're going to be able to afford to purchase, like the purchase price of your property, and learning how much you're pre-qualified. Like, not to say that everyone
budgeting.
Yeah,
basic
budgeting, right. Anyway, this is getting into a whole nother video, but it's a necessary conversation.
It is, and it is a part of fire, because like, how are we going to get there if we don't have the information that we need to get there? And you can't get the information if you are not vulnerable to say, I don't know.
Yeah, 100%. So it starts with a question, right? We being willing to ask the question. And sometimes that feels a little uncomfortable or feels like grungy, because you don't want to put yourself out there and risk being judged. But like I said before, if that goal, that early retirement is that important to you, or that financial goal is that important, you got to risk something. So I will stop there. Our next book for April, I can't believe we're already in April, is The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. So I'm really excited. I know you've read that book before. I have not. So I'm intrigued, and I'm ready to get into that. So there'll be a link.
And also, people, if you just want a little synopsis before you read the book, he actually has an interview, like a little short interview. I think it's like 15 minutes or so. No more than 30, with Oprah on Super Soul Sunday. So if you have podcasts and stuff like that, I think it was probably like a few months ago he did. It should be listed if you just want a little glimpse of what he speaks about, and just to hear about him. His story is extremely dynamic. So that's going to be a good book. I'm so excited.
Me too. I'm going to share the link to get the book below this video, as well as I'll look for the link for the podcast. And I also wanted to add in that Bernae, I know you were asking for more. Bernae actually has 2 podcasts. I just found out about that today. So maybe she has more of those stats and those things, and the male research and all that kind of stuff. So I know there's one that she started just because of COVID. So I'm interested to try and jump into those after tax season, because I don't have no time right now. But thank you. And I'm going to stop here so I can actually meet with you, so we can go through these W-4s, and we'll be back next month. Ciao.
Bye.